entire room, I am the only person who ultimately must make decisions in regard to the evidence that I'm hearing. I am the only one who must make findings about witnesses who come here and give evidence about other people and about state capture and about corruption. I and I alone must make those decisions.
Welcome to our news and thanks for joining us this evening. You're watching Unfiltered on SABC 3 and SABC News, and today our discussion is centered around that eventful day when Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo announced that the State Capture Commission would be getting underway, trying to uncover the truth about corruption in the public sector. What are your memories in the lead up to that day? And having heard all the testimonies now, some of them anticipated, some of them very animated, and some of them very technical, what have been your takeaways? And to help us unpack this conversation, we've invited into the studio, we have right here sitting with us, Wayne Duvenechi is the Chief Executive of OUTA. Nice, and we have from our Pretoria studio, Professor Diniko Maluleke, and we also have on Skype, David Lewis, who's the Executive Director for Corruption Watch. At some point in the show, we'll be talking to the spokesperson of the Justice Department to hear about some of the strides they have made in this regard. But let's start the conversation. Perhaps Wayne, start with you since you're here with us. You were proponents of the coming about of this process. What are your thoughts a year down the line?
Well, there's so much good information that's come out of the Commission. They're only just touching the surface. There's so much that has happened in state capture. It was obviously triggered, the term, through the previous Public Protector, to Madonsela's State of Capture report, but state capture has been around a long time prior to that, where we see how the state-owned institutions particularly have been used as the gateway to tap into massive infrastructure development expenditure. The modus operandi of revaluing assets on their balance sheets to make it look good for borrowing, and then the lending houses lending money for big projects such as roads, such as stadiums, and we see Eskom and power stations and so forth. It just goes on and on. These are the big ticket items where they've tapped into, and that expenditure then just starts running away. So you have 2 to 3 times overpriced assets that the country pays for, and inside all of that is where the plundering starts taking place. That's just one area. There's a lot of other areas, and this has been going on for a long time. And that modus operandi of having government-backed guarantees on the bonds that are borrowed is why we have Eskom sitting at 400 billion rand in debt, and that interest rate is just impossible to, or very difficult to service. Same thing with Sanral having to be bailed out, SAA, and it just goes on and on and on. And this is a very clever plan of people on the inside, which is government, people on the outside doing the tendering, and the rest is history. It's been a long decade of state capture under President Zuma.
Which brings us back to that question, are we any better having uncovered all of those truths? But we'll come back to it. Prof. Maluleke, let's welcome you into the conversation. I hope you've been listening. In outlining the mandate and the terms of reference, some specific incidents and people were mentioned in the name of the former President Jacob Zuma, in the Gupta family, but the evidence has been able to uncover a much bigger pool. What have been your thoughts in the past year in terms of the evidence that has come out of the State Capture Commission?
I think the work of the Commission so far has been commendable, very admirable, insofar as the Commission has managed to painstakingly call all of the, or rather most of the important role players that have been flagged in the Public Protector's report, and have done so with admirable efficiency with a lot of credibility until now. And I think that, if anything, this process seems to have inspired the confidence of many South Africans, and many South Africans have been following it. And that alone is part of the success of a commission of inquiry. It's not merely what happens at the end, but also during the commission of inquiry. But of course, if the commission of inquiry is not able to bring the Guptas to any of the hearings, it will be a gaping hole in its work, in my view.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Lewis, do you agree with the professor that there has been a lot of efficiency displayed in this process?
Look, I think that the Commission has been a very important episode in our lives as South Africans. I think the Commission has done its work, I agree, admirably and well. I remember I was the first chair of the Competition Tribunal, and people have often asked what was the most significant impact of the Competition Tribunal. And I think it was actually when people began to understand that even big business was subject to the rule of law. And I think in the Commission, we've seen the same thing. I mean, for me, there have been a lot of highlights. But for me, the highlight was the Zuma test, because it demonstrated that even this previously all-powerful president was not above being called to account by the law. And I think that was an important event for South Africa. I think Agreezy's testimony was important as well, for demonstrating that, our view that whistleblowers are heroes is right up to a point. Sometimes the best whistleblowers are those who've been equally complicit in the perpetration of corruption as, some of our biggest villains. And so I think the whole thing has been an important learning curve for South Africa. And then, very important information has been divulged. I mean, the dignity of the SAA executives who have testified, I think, was really, and that ranged from Minister Barbara Hogan to the previous CEO to previous head of HR there. And they testified with real dignity. You sort of came away from that feeling that, my God, if these people had prevailed, this would be a very, very different South Africa to the South Africa that we have today. And then, obviously also the revelations of Bosasa, which have demonstrated, I think, that if we thought this was solely a Zuma family plot, there have been many very large subplots as well. And I imagine that the Bosasa syndicate, which it seems is also involved, the Zuma certainly, is probably not the last time that is going to be revealed. And so I found the Commission very revealing. And we, as Corruption Watch, have had somebody, a writer in the Commission, reporting every day for community media that can't afford to send people to the hearings, just so that people get to know that at least in South Africa, accountability is still being demanded. And that's a very important lesson.
There's certainly a lot to go through, and David just beautifully there parlayed us into the different testimonies, which we will continue to talk about in the conversation. But we also asked you at home to take part in this conversation, especially in relation to whether there will be prosecutions in this process. And let's take a look now at some of your thoughts in this regard. Vincent Davins 2 saying, never, never until those in charge of prosecuting get out of politicians' pockets. And this is what we want to ask the spokesperson of the Justice Ministry, because they've promised to make sure that they separate these two roles. Hopefully one day soon, including corrupt and discredited journalists. That's a good fella. And Mtobi Simkabela saying, in South Africa, politicians from the ANC are above the law. How many times did the media expose corruption in government and nothing happened? The NPA is still downloading. That's a sense I think most of us have at this moment. You're watching Unfiltered. Let's take a break. Stay with us and take part in this important conversation. We'll be back in a moment.
Mr. Greasy, your affidavit at paragraph 22.10.4 says that Gavin Watson was seeing to the minister. Your evidence is that Gavin Watson was seeing the minister. They're two very different things. What was the position?
Chair, Mr. Watson would take money with to see to the minister when he was seeing the minister.
Okay.
Chair, is that sufficient, or must I give you the amount?
Well, you can tell us the amount as well.
I know the monthly amount was 50,000 rand.
Oh, and he would deliver it himself personally, or sometimes he would send you or somebody else?
I would have to pack it, and he often would deliver it in front of me.
Also, sometimes you went to Ms. Nomvula Mokonyane's house with him.
Yes, sir.
That's some of the captivating testimony we've had to watch. Welcome back. You're watching Unfiltered, and we're asking you today, are we any closer to uncovering the truth? Let's now join, or rather welcome in on the line, the Justice and Correctional Services spokesperson, Crispin Phiri. Mr. Phiri, thank you so much for talking to us this evening. We asked some of our viewers to interact with us, and one tweet that came through earlier was saying that the NPA is still downloading. When the new Justice Minister came in, he promised to put pressure on the NPA to take action about the information that's coming out of the state capture. How far are you?
Good evening, Desiree. Good evening to our viewers back home. I think let me just start by correcting the premise of your first statement, where you said that the minister had promised to put pressure on the NPA. You would know that in terms of our constitution, the NPA has prosecutorial independence, which means that no political figure, or anyone for that matter, can instruct the NPA to come and prosecute anyone. The NPA has a mandate to prosecute without fear, prejudice, or favor to anybody. So it would be incorrect to say that the minister came in and put pressure on the NPA.
Well,
on the contrary, the minister reiterated
he was going to have engagements with. He promised to have engagements with the NPA.
Deputy Chief Justice Zondo did say during the commission that nothing stops the NPA from obtaining information from the commission as and when they see it, and then acting on that. And I think that's what the minister reiterated. So having engagements with the NPA would never be to instruct the NPA to do something. It would be to see how we can assist the NPA from a resource point of view to ensure that they have the capacity to fulfill their constitutional mandate. And that's engagement that we've been having. It will continue to have with the NPA, but they would never extend to the prosecutorial powers of the NPA.
Do you agree, though, that there's a sense of a lag and there's no sense of urgency in terms of the public wanting to see something happening, prosecutions taking place?
I think that there is a need for us to see justice being done. That will always apply. Every time there's a legal process, everyone wants to see it reaching its logical conclusion, which is justice being done in the end. But you'd recall that the commission in itself, I think, is a massive step for society, especially our South African society where we regard corruption as something that's quite endemic. We now have a platform where people are able to go and actually put forward an allegation in the public, not hiding behind some nefarious platform, but they put forward this allegation in public, and ultimately there will be a report that is complied. Speaking of a democratic process like this, I think South Africa is one of the fewest countries in the world that allows this to happen. Just across the ocean in America, we saw what was called the Mueller Commission, which is comparatively speaking something similar to our State of Capture Commission. But that report was not furnished to the public. It was not something that happened in the glare of the public. So the State of Capture Commission is really proof that we are committed as a government to dealing with the rot that is there, but most importantly, dealing with it in a transparent manner. And we have no doubt that when the NPA is ready, it will act. But what will not happen is for politicians to put pressure on the NPA to act. I think we come from an era where we know that the NPA has been seen to act on political whims, and it cannot be this new administration as well that seems to create or perpetuate that type of nature or that type of conduct, especially because now more than ever, we need a credible NPA and we need an independent NPA.
So how is the Department of Justice and Correctional Services reflecting on this 1 year of the Commission?
As I said in the beginning, I think we will continue resourcing the Commission because we think that this is a very transparent way of dealing with the allegations of state of capture in our country. And as from where we stand, we think that it's an important milestone in our democracy that we're able to open up to the world and say, look, we think that something has gone wrong. And everyone who has information must come forward and ensure that the information gets presented in a manner which will ensure that it reaches its logical conclusion. We see justice being done. So in that sense, it's something that we're looking forward to see going on. Of course, we would say that at some stage it would reach its logical conclusion. But at the moment, the State of Capture Commission is a very important platform for us to deal with allegations of corruption in our country.
Mr. Phiri, let's thank you for your time and let you go for now.
Thank you.
Again, I think we're going to take that time to take a look at our tweets coming in, and as we ask our guests to be patient with us. I am who I am, or is it Bikwit Mohobe, saying no, because they're powerful and can buy judges. Even if they see evidence in front of them, they just brush it aside. And this is in relation to that question about whether justice will be served. It won't be easy because the perpetrators always try to conceal their deeds with evading justice and punishment primary in their minds. Unraveling their misdeeds would take time and need certain skills. All right, we're going to take another break. But as we go to break, I'm going to ask our guests to just take their time to think about the chairperson of the commission and your thoughts about how he exercises his work. Let's take a break. You're watching Unfiltered.
On Health Talk, we discuss everything from the common cold to illnesses you may not have heard of.
Fibroids are benign tumors. What that means is that they're not cancerous.
We're talking STIs, and clearly there's a lot of people out there who know, but I'm sure there's some who still don't.
We're talking about sexually transmitted infections. So these are infections transmitted between two partners engaging in sexual activity.
I developed vitiligo at the age of 5. As we went to dermatologists, they are the ones which told us that this condition is actually vitiligo.
After consuming a lot of mixtures, putting a lot of ointments, I just said it's enough.
When we deal with employee wellness, it's necessarily all of those things that, if are not attended to, will affect the company's bottom line in terms of productivity.
Watch Health Talk Saturday at 9 a.m.
Standoff between Alexandra residents and police. Following a forced eviction, officers retaliated by firing rubber bullets.
They just shoot at us. They don't even want to listen to us.
They've done us wrong as a community.
What created the situation? What led to these angry words being exchanged?
You're forcing me to say I have doubt. What is that thing? Don't treat me like a small boy. Don't do that. Because Human Rights Commission is not God.
Vuzimusi Dlamini, he's the senior investigator there, and he asked the question, can you just explain what this particular project did? Because of course there were a lot of money in that particular project, but it looks like little has been delivered.
The Commission's legal team wishes to place on record that it has not made and does not intend to make any concessions in that regard. In other words, in relation to the rules and the fair application of those rules.
This commission does not know who's guilty. It's trying to find out. And I raised this on Monday, that a legal process must be cleansed of prejudices that come from outside, because witnesses must have faith in our law and our judges and our systems.
The first purpose was to give him an opportunity to tell his side of the story. The second purpose was to enable an evidence leader and myself to put questions to him.
Well, that was undeniably the biggest appearance at the State Capture Commission, and we'll come back to that in a bit. But I was asking all our guests to think about Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo and his work. What are your thoughts on how he has carried himself so far?
Look, I think he's done an excellent job. Remember, he can only make recommendations from this process. What we are seeing is a lot of evidence, a lot of information coming to the fore, which the NPA can and will use, we believe. And one senses the frustration out there. We get it every day, hundreds of questions. Well, nothing's going to happen, and why is it taking so long? And we have to keep reminding people that the NPA, Shamila Batoya, has only been in office since February. Hermione Cronier recently. There's a lot of work that institution has been captured. There is a lot of compromise that has happened in the meantime, and it's not going to be easy. But one thing we can say is that if the rule of law flows, and flow it will without political interference, then the people that are implicated, if found guilty, will spend jail time. And we are confident that what is coming now and what is the work that is being done in the NPA, Special Investigations Unit, Assets Forfeiture Unit, all those institutions working together, we'll be seeing some really exciting stuff in the near future.
Professor Maluleke, one of our tweets was talking about judges being bought. Are we dealing with a credible judge here?
I think we are. I think we are dealing with one of our best judges at the moment. Of course, I understand the skepticism, given that people were very disappointed with the Falam Commission or the Marikana Commission. People were also very disappointed with the Seriti Commission. So commissions do not have a glorious history in post-apartheid South Africa any more than in apartheid South Africa. But I think in Justice Zondo we have seen someone who is patient, who uses authority and firmness when necessary, but allows for different points of views to be aired. So far, I think he has done a masterful, amazing job, even rescuing the commission whenever there has been questions around process and its own credibility. But of course, it will all hang on the kind of report that he presents to South Africans, whether that report will have sufficient bite. We know that it's up to the president to release that report and to act on it. But I think it will be important for this report to differ significantly from the kind of reports we saw from Falam and Seriti before.
Actually, David, people are not only itching for the NPA to take action, but there's also people saying we'd like to see some sort of interim report coming out from the judge, just so we can find out where his thoughts are in terms of all the evidence he's heard so far. What are your thoughts on how he's conducting his work and why he's not in a rush to release some sort of feedback?
Yeah, I think that is one error that the Commission has made. I mean, we said right at the beginning that interim reports should have been released, and it seems that they're not going to be. You know, I think the terms of reference are constructed in such a way that you could take off the work of the Commission, you could take on the terms of reference in bite-sized chunks. I mean, there's no need to wait until you've discovered all there is to discover about procurement before pronouncing on the evidence, say.
I'm going to ask you to hold on to those thoughts, because apparently we're time-tied and have to take a break, and we'll pick up with you as soon as we come back. Apologies for that, David. And goodbye to our SABC3 viewers. If you want to continue to take part in the conversation, switch on to DSTV 404 for a continuation of this discussion. Let's take a break.
The SABC News mobile app is your one-stop digital portal to all the news you need. Stay connected with the latest in breaking news. Watch the SABC News channel along with clips and live streams of all the big news events. And listen to all the SABC News radio stations live, including podcasts and much more. Simply download the SABC News app to your Android or iOS device from either the Play Store or the App Store. SABC News, independent, impartial.
Thousands of taxi and bus commuters have been left stranded in Bloemfontein.
From town to the taxi owners and the passengers, we need to communicate.
I ended up really on the streets since I think it was 93. Somebody will threaten you, yeah, I'm going to get you when you sleep.
Hinton says life on the streets is a living hell.
It's totally not safe on the street.
Who is killing who? There is one faction that thinks that it rules the municipality. And these people are running people crazy.
We have then a challenge that future public protectors, including myself, when I am doing my work, then there is that element of fear.
South African public protector Busisiwe Mkhwebane constantly making headlines with her work. We chat to the president of the African Ombudsman and Mediators Association, Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane, on African Perspective this Wednesday at 9 p.m. Central African Time.
We've come to tell you, Chair, that because of this and the reservations we've raised and our experience in this room, that my client has instructed me that he will take no further part in these proceedings. He respected you, he still does, he respects this commission, but the commission does not seem to know its ground rules.
I would like to discuss with them to see whether we can't find a situation where the concerns raised by the former president can be accommodated without compromising the job that the legal team of the commission has to do and the job that I have to do.
No one should have a wrong impression that the raising of the concerns was just done in order to disrupt or whatever the processes. These were genuine concerns that needed to be looked at. So I'm happy that we've found a solution so that this commission will be able to move to its finalities with our contributions.
Welcome back. You're watching Unfiltered. Just having seen that clip of a very determined advocate, Sikhakhane, who was determined to protect his client by all means. David, let's just recap with you where we stopped off, where you were talking about the unfortunate situation of no feedback coming out of the State Capture Commission in terms of where their thinking is at this moment as we reach the one-year milestone.
Yeah, well, as I was saying, I think that the Commission has erred in not releasing interim reports. Its terms of reference are structured in such a way that it could have released its report in bite-sized, digestible chunks, and they've chosen not to do so. I mean, they may have, good reason for doing so, for not doing so, but I think it was a mistake. But, be that as it may, I think, judges have different styles. Some are very aggressive, others are more courteous and more patient. Yep. I think, Judge Zondo definitely falls into the latter category. Maybe Judge Nugent in the SARS inquiry falls into the more sort of aggressive category. But I've been impressed at the way Judge Zondo, for the most part, has handled it. Did he make too many concessions to keep Zuma into the process? Well, maybe he did. But I think, on the other hand, it was very important. And I don't think Zuma's counsel or Zuma emerged as determined. They emerged as actually people who wanted to get Zuma out of the Commission and were not given the opportunity to do so by the very courteous, very polite, very reasonable stance that Judge Zondo adopted. And I think that's probably, for the time being, all to the good. Where I felt a little critical of Judge Zondo is that I think that there have been some real attempts to intimidate witnesses in the Commission. There have been these demonstrations around, for example, Pravin Gordon's testimony, where I think that Judge Zondo should have acted more firmly to defend his commission. You can't say these kind of things about commissions. You can't go and intimidate witnesses the way some people have, without without breaking the law, quite frankly. And I was a bit critical of him for not being firmer on that. But for the most part, I think he's been right in taking, as I say, the very courteous, very patient stance that he has taken. And while it's sometimes a little ponderous, dare I say it, to listen to, I think it probably was right. And as I say, in that exchange with Zuma's counsel, I don't think it was them who emerged as the strong people. It was them who emerged as the people who were wanting to find some reason for extracting their client, who had made a real mess of his testimony up to now, up to then, from the proceedings of the Commission.
Prof. Maluleke, as we try to get into the contents of the testimonies, we know of a few instances where the judge refused some applications, like, as you mentioned, David, with the Pravin Gordhan one, he refused the Gupta's brother's request to have a remote testimony. He refused Tom Moyane's request to cross-examine Pravin Gordhan. Recently, just last week, he refused Nomgcobo Jiba's request to cross-examine Angelo Agriti. What were your thoughts about those rejections?
I think it's a sign of the firm side of Judge Zondo. I mean, we underestimate his determination at our own peril. It's not as if he succumbs very easily to the shenanigans that some witnesses and their representatives or would-be witnesses bring to him. We saw him deal with the Zuma defense, and he has also kept the principle that whoever does not want to be cross-examined does not have the right to cross-examine others. And he has kept what is his authority his, and said that very firmly whenever his authority has seemingly been challenged by some of the witnesses. I think because the Guptas are mentioned in the terms of reference, it would only be fair for them to come and appear in person. Because if they don't, of course you could argue that there are other witnesses who should appear, but who have until now not come. And Justice Zondo has not yet used his subpoena powers. And that again is probably strategic on his part, not to subpoena anyone, but to invite. And he came close to threatening a subpoena when he was discussing the Zuma defense tactic of wanting to pull out. There were very trying
moments there.
Yes.
But could we have lost an opportunity?
I
Prof, could we have lost an opportunity in not letting the Gupta's brothers at least air out their thoughts? They don't live in the country anymore, and bringing them back to testify could take other legal processes.
I think the Gupta brothers are too important in this commission, if you look at its terms of reference, for them to give remote evidence in an environment that is not only outside the ambience of the commission, but actually outside the country. I think it would make a mockery of the commission, and I think Justice Zondo is correct to refuse that. But I think if they really have something important to say, to clear their names, they should hop on the plane and come back and give evidence.
Mm-hmm. Former President Jacob Zuma has been seen as a central player in the state capture narrative. Yeah. He said so much himself when he appeared. Yeah. What did you think of his testimony at the State Capture Commission?
I think it was weak. I think he exposed himself, trying to make out as if he's done nothing wrong, and just because there might not be some very clear or hard evidence that comes out of the leaks or so forth, there's enough to show how he's been implicated. When we see emails of people behind the scenes who are about to be appointed, and we learn of the authorities not even knowing, and then suddenly these appointments take place, and you can follow the trail, and as I say, join the dots, and the picture's now clearer without some of that information. I think he was extremely weak, and he's compromised himself. What will happen? Mm-hmm. I think the judge might use his subpoena powers, possibly even against the Guptas, and they can refuse because they're out of the country. But then that starts to trigger other avenues that lead to potential extradition treaties being kicked in, the Interpol coming into play, freezing of assets. So there are other ways to get them, yeah, and if they don't, well, that implicates them even further, and so it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out.
Mr. Luis, do you feel that the dots have been connected following the appearance of the former president?
Yeah, I think that some dots sure have been connected. Like, you know, I was very struck in his opening monologue when he happily admitted that, you know, not only had he cooperated with the Guptas in the setting up of their media empire, ANN7 and the New Age.
That was truly startling, wasn't it?
But he had actually initiated it. He had gone to them. They hadn't come to him. He had gone to them. He had suggested the name of the organization. He proudly told of his involvement with the organization. So when you put that together, and you then have the head of the GCIS coming and saying that actually Zuma attempted to use his power to try and get me to place all our advertising revenue with the Guptas. You look at those two things and think, well, he went to his friends and set up a media empire. They said to him, sure, chief, but this is going to be very expensive. Can you see it to it that advertising revenue from government comes our way? Well, there's dot one, there's dot two. And that's the end of the story as far as I'm concerned about the formation of the media empire. Similarly, with the whole Fakey Mentor thing, you know, Fakey Mentor forgot details like what the house looked like. But she recounted actual conversations with him. Plus, you know that the Guptas tried to influence the appointment of other cabinet ministers. Mm-hmm. So even if Fakey Mentor's evidence was a little dodgy, when you put all of it together, all the dots seem to click in. And those dots say Zuma allowed the Guptas to make cabinet appointments effectively. Yeah. So quite frankly, I think he really messed up his opening monologue, and that's why I think Sekani and the rest of his legal counsel were so anxious to get him out of the firing line. And by Zondo being so accommodating, as it were, they made it very difficult for him to walk out with any moral high ground at all. He would really have lost moral high ground had he done that. So I think, yes, I think the dots are being connected. I think a lot of dots were connected in the Agreesi testimony. I think the SAA testimony has worked out very well for those who are interested in uncovering corruption as well. So, I don't think this has gone the way of those who don't want some dots to be connected, actually.
Prof, one of the biggest conversations in the country right now is fundraising. And as Mr. Lewis has just stated, that the GCIS situation was just fundraising on another level. What were your thoughts of the former president's testimony?
Well, fundraising is not always called fundraising. I mean, take the Busasa Angelo Agrizi testimony. It's really about a form of fundraising, in inverted commas. You could argue that much of what we have called state capture actually occurred in the form of funding of projects around tenders and kickbacks related to all of that. So it clearly has been a means of raising funds that are sometimes illicit or that are sometimes corrupt in the relationships that are there. So, I mean, many people say Zuma was the biggest witness, and I agree. But I think Angelo Agrizi was also quite a super witness, even with all the negativities around his racism, and of course the fact that his evidence still needs to be tested in some cases. So certainly fundraising has become an issue, but I would distinguish between the forms of fundraising given out in the Zondo Commission so far to the current discussions around fundraising around the presidency of the ANC. For example, I wouldn't want to mix those two.
Well, we were talking about your thoughts about the Jacob Zuma testimony, but we're going to take a break now. You're watching Unfiltered, and when we come back, we're going to just try to unpack in the time that we have some of the testimonies, including that of the whistleblowers, and if you juxtapose those against the testimony of the former president, if he was able to punch holes in those. Let's take a break. We'll be back in a moment.
We have then a challenge that future public protectors, including myself, when I am doing my work, then there is that element of fear.
South African public protector Busisiwe Mkhwebane constantly making headlines with her work. We chat to the president of the African Ombudsman and Mediators Association, Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane, on African Perspective this Wednesday at 9 p.m. Central African Time.
We stay on the visuals, they're busy shooting.
We drove around this.
At that point in time, I'm talking October 2010, did you know Mr. A.J. Gupta?
Yes, Chairperson, I did know him.
Are you comfortable to tell the chairperson how it came about that you knew him?
The President proceeded to say the following in isiZulu. Mfoka baba, kunala madoda kwaGupta, ngifuna ukuthi uhlale nabo futhi ubancede.
The testimony there of Temba Maseko, led ably by Advocate Malika, who there were reports in the newspapers over the weekend that his house was broken into, and also questions raised about whether that was linked to his work at the state capture. But let's take a look at some of your thoughts in regard to this conversation we're having today, reflecting on a year of the State Capture Commission. Mashiho Tadi saying, okay, I would imagine that the kids are sleeping at this moment, so I really don't see a point of the commission to continue, because our leaders go there to pee on our constitution, to lie under oath. According to Cyril's affidavits, he has never met David Watson, but the company that was handling his campaigns was one of the Busasa 9, Siguphi Manje. All right? Dr. Anathi Ntozini saying, I don't think it's the job of the inquiry to prosecute. The commission might assist in finding the truth, but there can be no real consequences based on any information given or what happens to the witnesses. Subsequent investigations will need to be done for this to happen. Earth and Water saying the South African problem of dealing with corruption is very deep and scary. It begins with our porous constitution, the corrupt judiciary, which the politicians have found to use it against the will of the nation, and the untouchables. All right, those are your thoughts, and thank you so much for sending them through. What for you were the most outstanding testimonies in this entire year? We know there's been a lot.
Yeah, look, I think Agrisi was one. You know, when you have whistleblowers, people voluntarily coming forward, that's excellent stuff. We saw Cynthia Stimple, we've seen others. We
spoke to Cynthia Stimple on the show. Totally amazing.
Incredible. But at the time when she had to go through this process, it was a very frightening experience for her. What was going to happen, she didn't know. She's a strong person. And it's a textbook case of when it goes right. This is how it can be done. But there are many whistleblowers. It goes right
for us, but she says in terms of her family safety,
her life is in turmoil. You know, it's lost her job, had expensive costs in having to defend herself in the labour courts and others. Tulium Share. There's Dawa that was pushed out. There was Sylvain Bosk, a lot of people. This is just one institution, SAA. But what was able to come out of that through this commission is so much evidence, so much clarity, and the facts of what happened and how Dudumnyeni and how those implicated, the people on the board, were able to usurp and abuse their powers. And this is what's happened in other state-owned institutions. We see in Transnet, Brian Molefe, Anoj Singh, how Salim Essa, the kingpin in all of this, was able to move billions offshore into China, and then following from that, we see now a lot of money that flowed into various accounts. That's going to come out. Those people are going to be implicated, and if it all flows, as I said earlier, the rule of law flows, those people will have to go to jail if they are found guilty for these gross crimes which have crippled our economy and put us in a very tough situation now.
Prof, do you agree that Pravin Gordhan was treated with kid gloves, as has been asserted by the economic freedom fighters?
Well, I don't know that he was treated with kid's glove. You could accuse Justice Zondo of treating every witness with kid's glove, because that is his approach. It's his temperament. But I think people are underestimating him because I think there is a plan behind his patience, behind his tactical and courteous approach. So it's easy to mistake him for treating people with kids' gloves. Of course, this is a commission, and he has to make sure that it draws as much information as possible without coercion. Now, we know that there is no love lost between the EFF and Pravin Gordhan. So that too may be a factor in that comment that has come from the EFF, and I think that there is no love lost between Pravin Gordhan and the EFF. On the other hand, they have become mortal enemies. I would be surprised if the EFF said something different, and I think Gordhan, given the opportunity, would say something similar about the EFF.
So what for you has been the most convincing testimony that we definitely did go through state capture, which the former president seems not to be convinced about?
The former president being President Zuma.
Yes.
Look, I think we must not underestimate President Zuma. I think he and his team went to the Zondo Commission with a plan, with a strategy. And that strategy had to do both with what happened inside of the commission, but also what was happening outside. So he was using his time there also to mobilize the people outside, which is why he gave that monologue. That monologue is not an accident. It was intended not just for Justice Zondo, it was also intended for his supporters who were camping outside. So there was a dual strategy of using the commission to mobilize politically, but also of denying everything except that which is undeniable. And thirdly, of using the commission to practice for a possible court appearance. And I think when they said he wants to pull out, it's because they felt that they had done what they had come to do at the commission. So there was a method in that madness. I wouldn't think that he failed totally in his methodology if you look at the dual purpose that he was using for his appearance before the commission.
David Lewis, OUTA and Corruption Watch have been some of the multiple civic organizations at the forefront of this fight against corruption. As we get into a further period, over a year of the commission, what would you like to see happening?
I think I would like to see Judge Zondo starting to exercise these subpoena powers. I mean, up until now, the overwhelming majority of witnesses who have appeared have been people who have been eager to cooperate with the commission. I think that we need to see more of those who are not going to be eager to cooperate with the commission. But I think the commission needs to carry on doing the work that it's doing in the way that it's doing it. I mean, one should never imagine that the commission is the only act in town. I mean, not only have there been the other commissions, but the point has been made earlier that the National Prosecuting Authority doesn't have to wait for the commission to take the action that it needs to take. And much of this evidence that, many South Africans are hearing for the first time, for those sort of professional watchers of the corruption scene, so to speak.
Yeah.
I mean, some of this evidence has been out there in the public domain.
Okay, we're going to have to wrap it now. Prof, your final thoughts? What would you like to see going forward?
I would like to see the Guptas appearing before the commission. I would like to see the commission protecting its witnesses a little better than it has done until now. And I would like to have an interim report, if at all possible. I think those are some of the things I would love to see.
Wayne?
Yeah, I think I agree with David and the professor. Without a doubt, subpoena powers. There are some people, there's low-hanging fruit here. Moshe Benzizwane, Richard Seleka, there's a number of people. The evidence is clear out there. We need these people to come and answer some really tough questions because the NPA would also like to use that information. But as David said, there's a lot of information out there, and I think we can get going with some prosecutions.
As we thank our guests, David Lewis, Executive Director at Corruption Watch, Professor Tiniko Maluleke from the University of Pretoria. Thank you so much for talking to us this evening, and Wayne Duvenage, CEO at OUTA. Let's take a look at your polling results. I'm waiting for the poll to come up. Will we ever see the prosecution of those who are involved in corruption? 19% of you say yes. An overwhelming 81% not so convinced, and that's how we come to the end of our conversation tonight. Thanks for watching. Till next Monday, bye-bye.